Hi. Hello. Hello. Happy Thursday. We're back. We're back with more Sydney Powell. Hello. Hello, everyone. What's up? How you doing? Oh, let me see. I saw Corso in here. Shout out Corso for being here. Dee, I saw Dee. I don't know if Dee is still here. I see Tipsy Gypsy. Hello, my love. I saw Britt Nicole. Hi. Fem. Hello, beloved. It's good to have you back, Fem. I missed you. And I see AZ. What's up? Hello. Hello, everyone. Meet me. You made it. Yay. I'm happy you made it, Meet Me. Thank you for being here. Hello, Laura. Hello. I'm here gaming. Well, at least you're not here getting on me about being late. I hope you guys had a good day. It's Thursday. It's baby Friday Junior. We love you too, fam. We love you. But I'm glad you're back. We're going to continue. I've been covering the Sydney Powell case. Hello, hi, welcome. Replay viewers, new subscribers, new viewers, lurkers, bullies, whatever it is. Hello, welcome. Hello against all logic. Hello. We're covering Sydney Powell case. This is the part 3. I think where there's like 6 parts that I'm doing. So today we're going to cover, yesterday we covered opening statements for defense and her father's testifying. And today we're going to cover the prosecution and the teacher from school that was on the phone with Brenda when the crime happened. So if you aren't caught up, please watch the previous lives. I did a deep dive part 1 with body cam footage, crime scene, all the background. So please make sure you like the videos, go support. Hello, Cat Randall. Support, go watch if you're not caught up. Also go back and watch older videos too. I feel like when I first started my channel, like I covered some pretty good stuff. I have like some Wade Wilson lives. If you didn't watch my Ashley Bocanegra case, I was spacing it out for a minute. Please go back and watch it. That will forever be one of my favorite. I love her. I love to talk about, well, it's not good. It was a horrific crime, but that whole case, all about it. I think Ashley deserves justice, and I think the people that beat her to death don't deserve to be out soon. Well, not soon, but in a while, when they get parole. Ashley Bocanegra was beat to death by her friends, a set of 2 bullies. And I did a deep dive. There's 6 parts, and that was the first case deep dive that I did on my channel, and I really love it. So if you haven't watched my previous videos, go watch that, please. It's really good. I love that case. We're gonna continue. I always said that, we're never gonna stop talking about Ashley here. And I have some stuff coming up regarding that case. I'm really proud of that. So you guys go back and watch it, please. I got all the footage, and it's horrific. She gets beat by the girlfriend of the guy she's cheating on her boyfriend with, and they beat her to death, basically, essentially. Hello, Tony. Good evening. I'll have to go watch this. Yeah, it's Ashley Bocanegra, and it was like, I think it was like 3 videos in. I think my first one was the Maddie Soto case, and then maybe Wade Wilson, and then I started the Ashley Bocanegra case. And like I said, I'm going to continue to talk about it. We have some stuff coming up, but I'm not going to tell you right now. You're going to have to wait. Savage. Well, I had the body cam footage, and I get so mad about that case and so upset. It's terrifying. They beat her up at her apartment complex, and I have the body cam footage of her like leaving the before and after, and like it's brutal. And I am familiar with a couple of her family members because I covered the case, and they actually loved that I covered the case and how I covered it. I've had really good feedback from the family, and I'm very proud of that. And that was the first deep dive. Anyways, it's not about me, But go back and watch all the previous videos. I promise it was when I was first starting, but I promise it's worth your time at least watching the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 series. It's 6 parts. So let's move on. Back to Sydney Powell. I'm pulling it up on the screen. We're covering the prosecution. Did I say hi again, Saw Logic? Hello, hello. And I saw Kat, I saw Tony, and then I saw, hey, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. Did I say that right? What's up? I'm glad you made it. Hello. The birthday cake premise was particularly, the birthday cake. Oh my gosh, Fem, you're so good. You remember that detail from the Ashley case, right? Where she went to get the cake for the boyfriend. So sad. Okay. Oh, I'm going to continue. This prosecution, Sydney Powell.
Thank you again, Your Honor.
He stabbed her mother to death and is claiming, well, it's not.
Throughout yesterday and during the
schizophrenia.
voir dire process, each of you were presented with quite a bit of information. You got to hear from the court about what the process itself is, and then you got to hear from the state and defense counsel about burdens, about evidence, about your role as jurors.
Hello, buddy.
And I can promise you that I'm not going to go over all of that again. But what I am going to ask from each of you is to draw on your memory, something that Prosecutor Brian Stano talked about. And I can assure you, you're going to hear this over and over and over again throughout trial. And that it is the duty of the jury to listen to and weigh the evidence presented. And I want to take the briefest moment to talk about where evidence comes from, because it doesn't come from this podium. It doesn't come from myself. It doesn't come from Prosecutor Brian Stano. It doesn't come from Attorney Don McLaughlin. The evidence is going to come from this witness box, those who testify in it and those who present evidence through it. That's where the evidence comes from. And what our witnesses testify to, what evidence is presented through them, it's up to you. Up to you to give its attention, to give it its credibility, and to weigh it. And I know it sounds simple and maybe even confusing as to why we keep bringing up the importance of evidence. But I assure you, it's because the uniqueness of this case. Because you've learned yesterday generally what this case is about. But the actual core of this case comes down to one simple question: whether or not the defendant, Miss Sydney Powell, was suffering from a severe mental disease, and because of that severe mental disease, could not understand the wrongfulness of her actions when she took the life of her mother, Brenda Powell. Now, I promise you, I don't mean to diminish or simplify the questions that are going to be presented to you, but you're quickly going to learn. We had a lot to say about this yesterday, the crime. This is not a case about who did it. Yeah. This is not a case about how it was done. Honey. This case will come down to this sole question: whether or not Miss Powell, at the time of the murder, was suffering from a severe mental disease which prevented her from knowing the wrongfulness of those actions.
Okay, so we've had a lot to say about this. I just want to pause if you missed the previous 2 lives. We've had a lot to say about it, right? Because she's diagnosed schizophrenic. She hits her mom in the head, blunt force trauma, numerous times, and stabs her in the neck, arms, and slashes her throat 30 times. Well, all inclusive. But and so recently, while we're covering the case, is because on December 26th, her appeal got approved to have her conviction overturned. So we're going to see a new trial, or she'll probably get a plea deal. And my idea is that she's probably going to get released into mental health treatment. And we saw that with another case today that I'm going to be covering this weekend. So I feel like they might just put her in a facility to get the help that she needs. But I don't know. I mean, we saw the body cam footage. We saw the staging of the scene. We saw everything. So make sure you watch the other parts if you missed it. But yeah, again, I'm always curious what you guys think.
And although that sounds like a direct question, I want to stress to each of you, it's not as simple as reading a medical report. It's not as simple as listening to testimony from doctors. You are going to have to listen to all the evidence. You're going to have to weigh that evidence. And the state believes that when you hear that evidence, apply it to your role as a juror, you're going to be able to recognize that Miss Sydney Powell is responsible for the murder of her mother, Brenda, and she was not suffering from a severe mental illness or disease that prevented her from knowing the wrongfulness of what she did. And my goal here this morning is to provide you a little bit more insight as to what the state believes the evidence is going to show. In December of 2019, Miss Powell was notified of her dismissal from the University of Mount Union. Over the last few semesters, she was struggling academically. She was struggling with the concerns that college brings. And at some point, she was put on a probationary period. Unfortunately, that probation period did not turn out well for Miss Powell. And in December, she was notified by the University of Mount Union that she was going to be dismissed for the spring semester. She could reapply after that spring semester had finished. And Miss Powell herself was provided notice. She had to sign for that notice that this was happening. Now, Mount Union knew of her dismissal. Miss Powell knew of her dismissal. But everybody else in Miss Powell's life had no idea what was going on. Because Miss Powell hid that. She hid that from her friends, from her family. She did that and lied to her parents, Stephen and Brenda. According to everybody else, Miss Powell was still a student at Mount Union. Her grades were okay. Her scholarship was not at risk. She was doing fine. But in reality, things were much different.
Hey, Stormy, good to see you.
In January of 2020, Mount Union begins its spring semester. And here, Miss Powell returns to the university. She returns to campus. She returns to her dorm life. She moves back into her dorm with her roommate, Lauren Curry. She continues to engage in sorority life and programming, and she uses what the campus has to offer. The whole time, this lie is continuing. She's continuing to lie to her family that everything's normal. She's continuing to lie to her friends, even her roommate, that she's still going to class.
She did.
Between January and the week of February 24th, the Mount Union Dean of Students Administration, John Frazier, Michelle Gaffney, you're going to hear from them. They had to have meetings with Miss Powell to discuss her enrollment, or lack thereof, and to discuss that because she's not a student for this semester, she cannot be on campus. She cannot be in her dorm. But rather than fixing the problem, Miss Powell continued her lies, now to the administration.
This is the process.
Tells them, of course, I'll get this handled. I'll be out of my dorm. Everything will be fine. But again and again, Miss Powell remained on campus. The administration offered to help Miss Powell. Do you want us to speak with your parents? Let them know what's going on. Another lie. Miss Powell says, no, my parents are okay. They understand. I talked to them already. In reality, nobody knows yet. On February 24th of 2020, Miss Powell does leave campus. And she discloses to her friends, her roommate, Miss Curry, those in her sorority, that her and her parents have agreed that it would be best for her to take some time away from university. That's another lie. Because although she tells that to her friends and her classmates,
no, well, the lies.
Stephen and Brenda, they
still
don't know what's going on. In fact, they think that Sydney's not going to return to their home here in Akron until spring break, the week of March 3rd.
Gotta write this down.
Now, Stephen and Brenda, they start to notice something. They start to kind of push on Sydney. They notice that she's home in the afternoon more here in Akron when she should be in class. And they try to confront Sydney. But rather than receiving answers, once again, they receive lies. Sydney, why are you home during the day? Oh, class was canceled. Oh, I have an excuse to not appear in class. Stephen Powell recognizes that his tuition that he pays to Mount Union still hasn't been withdrawn. Sydney, what's going on with the tuition? Don't worry, Dad. I'll get it handled on Monday. Still hiding the fact that she's not a student there at this time. Now, the state...
Imagine going to class and like showing up and taking notes and just being like, I'm showing up. You're not even enrolled. Like, you're not even enrolled. for months. You know, I said it in the first live. It was like, no lie is ever better than the truth. Very much true. Dee Dee says, I'm going to detention. Detention is fun here. When you go to detention, we get in all kinds of trouble in detention. I'm basically like running it. And so it's like, you know how that goes. But Dizzy's like, yeah.
Isn't going to pretend we don't understand that stress. Every human being has been in a position where lies are a little bit heavy. And you don't want to confront what's really going on, especially to your parents.
But you're fine.
And for
don't worry about
the individual
don't worry about it.
age, at Ms. Powell's
I appreciate you.
Position in life, college can be a little bit overwhelming. We're not ignoring that. We're not ignoring the anxieties and the stress that comes with that. But these lies were built and controlled by Ms.
Hello,
Powell.
Edith. Hello.
They were built upon each other, protecting herself and hiding her reality. And during the week of February 24th, after she's left campus, she knows she can't return home because spring break doesn't start until March 3rd. And so Ms. Powell starts to continue to visit campus, staying with friends, staying at local hotels. But what she's doing is not returning home because she'd have to confront the reality that things were not as perfect as she told her parents. Ms. Powell has conversations with her mom, Brenda, that she'll be home on March 3rd after class. Class would end around 2:30. She'd be home for spring break. And that night, March 2nd, she texts her former roommate, Lauren Curry. She asked to see if Lauren Curry would be okay if she came and watched The Bachelor with them and their friends. Something they did regularly. Monday night, Bachelor night, we all get together, we watch the show.
Was I not clear?
On March 2nd, that's what Ms. Powell did. She returned to Mount Union campus. She returned to the university to meet with her friend Lauren, and she watched The Bachelor with her friends. Now, I think it's important to note, just briefly, that during the time of this, the Powell family used an app on their phones called Life 360, an app that a lot of families use, especially families with children. It allows families to keep in touch, to make sure everybody's okay. Specifically allows you to let you know that the kids are where they need to be. And that comes into play on the morning of March 3rd. On the morning of March 3rd, Stephen Powell recognizes that the tuition still hasn't been taken out. So being a dad, he takes the effort to try to work through Mount Union's website and figure out what's going on. And for the first time on March 3rd, 2020,
can you guys hear that or no? Can you guys?
Ms. Powell returns from Mount Union to her home in Akron, to the family home. Now, Mr. Powell recognizes this on the Life 360 app. Well, Sydney's home, it's the morning of March 3rd, she should be in class. And Mr. Powell decides to drive.
Okay, I just want to make sure you guys can hear because.
But he decides to leave his phone at work.
Something weird happened on my end.
He's driving home, Miss Powell will see that dad's on his back.
Okay, we're good.
And he wants to confront Sydney. He wants to find out what's going on. And that's what happens. He arrives home to their house in Akron. He meets with her, and this is where she discloses to her dad that she's struggling with school, that she doesn't like it, that she doesn't know if this is what she wants to study, and that Mount Union might not be the place for her. But she doesn't disclose the full story yet. Mr. Powell, being a dad, is concerned for his daughter. He knows the golden rule that if you put things off, it's just going to become worse. So he encourages her that he's going to contact her mom, Brenda, and they're going to figure this out. She's going to get it together. She's going to be back in class. She can take the summer off and work and take a break, but she needs to get back in class, and she needs to turn this around.
It was a mic thing, sorry.
And he returns to work. Mr. Powell then contacts Brenda, his wife. He lets her know that Ms. Powell is having some struggles with Mount Union enrollment. And he knows that Brenda, being a mom, is really good at this stuff. Brenda, can you help figure this out? What's going on?
Hello, Britt.
So Brenda
Thank you, guys.
leaves her work at Akron Children's,
Hello.
where she works as a child life specialist. She works with children and families of those dealing with health issues. She guides them through the health process. And Brenda leaves work to return home to help with the Mount Union enrollment issues. And at home, she meets Miss Powell, Sydney Powell. We know that around 12 to 12:15, Miss Brenda Powell calls the University of Mount Union. She talks to Mount Union, but she leaves a voicemail or a message with the secretary of the dean of students.
Oh, you have a lot
John Fraser and Michelle Gaffney, they're still in a meeting. They cannot talk to Brenda at this time. But John Fraser and Miss Gaffney, they call back as soon as they're available. And they call Brenda back. Brenda answers the phone. Brenda introduces herself.
It's important.
And John Fraser and Michelle Gaffney, they introduce themselves as well. Hi, Brenda. This is Mount Union University returning your call. Brenda says, thank you so much for calling me back. But the phone call is interrupted. John Fraser and Michelle Gaffney at this time hear a thud. And they hear screams. And they hear thud after thud after thud. They're still on the phone. They're trying to find out what's going on, but they can't get a response, and the phone call hangs up. John Fraser and Ms. Gaffney, they start to call back. They're concerned. They call back once, there's no answer. They call back twice, there's still no answer. And on the third call back, Brenda's phone picks up. Yes, this is Brenda. Now, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Gaffney, they've met Sydney multiple times. They try to address her enrollment issues. They know who Miss Powell is.
So Sydney got on the phone. So like Brenda got home, if you missed the live. And so she's like talking to the people, the dean at the school, and Sydney gets on the phone and pretends to be her mom. So when you claim insanity in any state, it's pretty difficult, but like you have to prove insanity, you don't know right from wrong. And we saw the staging of the window. And then she pretends to be Brenda Powell. So she just like split personality, or was it premeditated? Was it intentional? What was she just evil? You know, that's why we called the first live the deep dive, like nurture versus, or no, that was Brian Coe, but it's like the same thing, nurture versus nature. Like, why did she do that, right? And she's schizophrenic, but clearly the state, the prosecution doesn't believe so. And so it's a difficult case. It's a lot to deal with.
And when that phone answers and the person on the other line announces herself as Brenda, John Fraser knows it is Sydney Powell on the phone.
Yeah, she failed.
And he says, Sydney, I know this is you. And the phone is
you. Thank you, Kristen. I'm glad you're here.
Now, Mount Union's concerns are heightened.
Yes, please hit the like button.
They decide that it might be best that they contact the police. Now, being in Alliance, Ohio, they were concerned about calling 911 and about where that would be directed to. So they Googled the best number for the Akron Police Department, and they reached Sergeant 𝗏. Sergeant 𝗏 answered the phone. He learned that Mount Union's concerns were about the Powell address.
Psychotic.
He heard about the screams. He heard about the thuds. And Sergeant 𝗏 at that time decided it would be best to dispatch the Akron Police Department through the radio for a welfare check at the Powell's household. And in doing so, the Akron police would respond to try to figure out what might be going on at the Powell household. Now, before they arrive, as the radio dispatch is going out, Detective Kenneth Deese hears the radio call out. Now, Detective Deese has been with the Akron Police Department for a long time, but he's also very good friends with the Powell family. You know, Steve and Brenda, Sydney, their son, he knows everybody, and he knows that address. So he's concerned immediately. His friends, something's wrong. So he calls Stephen Powell. Stephen, the police are going to your house. Is everything okay? This is new to Mr. Powell. All he can say is, everything's fine. Sydney and Brenda are home. And Stephen hangs up with Detective Deese.
Could be, Laura.
And he calls Brenda. There's no answer. And he calls Sydney. There's no answer. But Sydney calls back. And when Sydney calls back, Stephen asks, hey, what's going on? She says, Dad, nothing. Mom's on the phone with 𝗟𝘂𝗋. In reality, Brenda is laying in her bedroom. She's on her back, and she's suffering from severe blunt force trauma and severe sharp wound trauma. She's bleeding
30 stab wounds. It's overkill.
Mr. Powell tells Sydney,
We know that's
"Police
overkill."
are on the way." And this is when Sydney, for the first time, she becomes hysterical. Dad, somebody broke in.
Disassociated.
Somebody broke in. There was a break-in. We heard glass break. And the phone call is terminated. Now, the Akron Police Department arrives. Officer 𝗟EITG, Officer Jackson. You're going to hear from both of them. They arrive to the Powell address on Scudder Drive in Akron, Ohio. Officer 𝗟EITG is first to respond. Officer 𝗟EITG knocks on the door.
Yes.
There's no response, but he starts to hear screaming from the door. He's very concerned. Officer 𝗟EITG runs around the back of the house to try to find out what's going on, while Officer Jackson arrives and is finally able to get through the front door because Miss Powell finally opens it amongst the screams. And Miss Powell is met by Officer 𝗟EITG and Officer Jackson. She's hysterical. She's scared. She's erratic with trying to direct their attention. And she's telling them immediately, there was a break-in, there was a break-in, somebody broke in, Mom's down, there's blood, there's blood. Mom told me to get out, get out. She's trying to tell the cops that there was a break-in. Officer 𝗟EITG goes to the back room where he finds Brenda on the ground, lying on her back. Unfortunately, Brenda, at the time when he got to her, he recognized that she was not surviving, that Brenda was dying. Next to Brenda, Officer 𝗟EITG recognized a cast iron frying pan and a kitchen steak knife. Through the investigation, it would later be determined that the blunt force wounds came from the cast iron frying pan and the sharp cutting wounds, stabbing wounds came from the steak knife.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. You went back and watched where the mom said that she thought she had been scamming her. Right, it shows intention, and that she was already feeling some type of way or no. But I'm all for it. Like mental health, I believe that. We've talked about it here. I just want to go back to her comments. Laura said she was in a psychotic break when she was unaliving her and then stabbed her when she broke the window and was recovering. It is possible. I have a lot to say about that. We're open to mental health here as well. I've been very open about what I accept on my channel. I respect it. I open it. It's real, and it needs to be taken more serious in the justice system. But with this case, it is tough to make my opinion about it, because I feel like, yes, maybe she was having some kind of because she was best friends with her mom, and I know what that's like. So it's like, what would make you do something like that? And then Brady says 30. Yeah, she stabbed her 30 times, slashed her throat, in the back, and then in the arms, neck, and then hit her in the head. It's not like out there, but I believe I read a report where it said it was like she had a lot of blunt force trauma. Like she got hit. Sydney hit her in the head with an iron skillet, like that you cook with. It's wild. Go back and watch part 1. I show the crime scene photos. It is a hard case to analyze. And again, yes, she was texting the mom about scamming. They were texting about that. Does she have an official diagnosis? Yeah, they diagnosed her schizophrenic. Actually, I wanted to pull up the crime scene photos, but I have to share a screen. So, because it was so big, I have all the crime scene photos. They're brutal too. So a lot of them I didn't show for like YouTube policies, but she's schizophrenic, and they diagnosed her schizophrenic, and wasn't I think like dissociative personality or something of the sort. And I can't remember something else, but the main one was that she was schizophrenic. Did Mary make it? Wait, did I miss Mary? Hello, Mary. Yay. I saw Dee Dee say something, not a black and white situation. Again, yeah, we said that last night, right? It's not all black and white with mental health. Everyone reacts differently. It's different for everyone. And it's a pretty serious thing. So it makes me sad. I'm glad you made it, Mary. Thank you for being here. You're not late, you're fine.
Now, at the time, Officer Jackson, in hopes
Nothing
to
easy about
help
this one.
Sydney calm down, he still doesn't know what's going on. Sydney's covered in blood. He doesn't know if there was a break-in. He doesn't know if she's hurt. He escorts her out of the house.
After the
where
unaliving,
she
that's right,
continues
against all
to
logic.
disclose there was a break-in. We heard glass break. Mom told me to get out. At this time, Stephen Powell is beyond
Dee
the type of call that you can't imagine getting,
attention.
and he rushes home. And as a dad, he goes right to Miss Powell. He's concerned. She tells her dad at this time, Dad, there was a break-in. There's so much blood. Mom told me to get out. Now, Sydney is covered in blood. That blood is Brenda Powell's blood.
Put up if you're not.
And there was a break in the glass. The back window was shattered. But that back window was shattered by Miss Sydney Powell, staging the break-in. There's blood found by this broken glass. That blood is Brenda Powell's blood that was on Sydney when she broke the glass. And Miss Powell does have cuts. She is injured. And that's from the glass itself when she broke it.
Yeah, against all logic was right. Yeah, she got diagnosed after, but we talked about it last night where there had to have been signs, right? And I understand the dad protecting his daughter after what just happened. I get that. If that's the case. But we heard from the bestie too on part one, the best friend. She like talks about how she was drinking and she had been cheated on and dating a guy, and like no one had any idea. It was like a total second life that she was living. And someone asked like, what is that disorder? I think it's like, is it dissociative personality disorder? Like split personality disorder, right? Where you have like borderline personality disorder, says Dee Dee. I wouldn't want her on the street though. We saw it with the Slender Man case today, which I'm going to be covering soon. But yeah, you see, that's right. That's right. She gets a new trial as of December 26, 2024, which is wild. The appeal got approved and conviction is being overturned. She got like 25 years, or no, 15 years, I believe. That's what it was. 15 years to life.
Now, you, the jury, I will tell you this, that Miss Powell would later undergo a series, extensive interviews with psychologists and psychiatrists, doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments. Initially, she would disclose to doctors that there was a break-in, that she was in the basement when they heard a glass break. Yeah. And then later she blacked out. All she could remember is waking up with a knife in her mom's throat and that she was trying to stop the bleeding. She tells doctors that when she's initially met with them. Now she continues to seek care. She continues to go to the doctors, and she continues to tell them that she blacked out from when she was in the basement and she cannot remember what happened. Now, you, the jury, are going to be asked to make a decision.
You think she had an alternative? I know what they are, the difference, but
and you're going to hear from a lot of witnesses. You're going to hear both from the state's witnesses as well as defense witnesses. You're going to hear first responders, detectives, Mountain Union staff, the medical examiner's office.
I think
You're going to hear from Stephen Powell, Miss Sydney Powell's dad. You're going to hear from Detective Deese. You're going to hear from defense witnesses, doctors, and hospital staff who have all treated Miss Powell, as well as the state's witness who met with Miss Powell to determine her mental state. And at the end of this, you're going to be presented with the decision on this case. Now, I want to address the law briefly, just like I did evidence. I promise it's quick. The law does not come from me, from Prosecutor Steve.
I like your opinion.
Attorney 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. The law comes from the court, from Judge McLaughlin's court, from her herself. The law doesn't come from our ideas or our conceptions of what the law is, from our past experiences or TV shows like Law and Order. The law only comes from Judge McLaughlin. And the first issue you're going to have to decide are the charges that the state presented. 2 theories of murder, along with felonious assault, and lastly, tampering with evidence. Now, that seems like a lot, but I can promise you a lot of these questions that you're going to have to ask and answer have already been answered for you. So let's take a look at murder. Well, we know this happens in the state.
I do agree with BPD.
We know it happened in Summit
It could
County,
be possible.
and nobody,
Or like
what you'll hear
schizophrenia.
from the defense, is denying that Miss Sydney Powell did this. It's not about who did
You
it.
should have a
So nobody's
psychotic
denying that she did purposely cause the death of her mom,
episode.
Brenda. Those are all answered for you. The same with the state's alternative theory here in murder, that it's in the state of Ohio. She did cause the death, and she did it by committing or attempting to commit felonious assault. These are all answered for you. Felonious assault in Summit County, Sydney Powell did knowingly cause or attempt to cause physical harm by
Brady,
the use of a deadly weapon, a frying pan
Yes,
and a
Brady.
knife. The same goes with tampering. These are all answered for you. There's an agreement there. So what you're going to be left with is the sole core question of this case. And I'll remind you again, the law does not come from me. It does not come from this PowerPoint. You'll be instructed on the law, and that's important to remember. The law comes from the court, and you will be left to decide whether or not Ms. Powell was suffering from a serious mental disease
Oh, Lily.
that wouldn't allow her to know the wrongfulness of her actions that day. Now, this is a very unique legal scenario.
Thanks, Maddie.
legal
Love you
case,
too. Thanks for
where
being here,
the
girl.
burden is actually going to shift. And the state owns the burden to first present the case. We need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and we hold that burden strongly. We have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Powell committed these offenses. And after that, that burden is going to shift to the defense in a very unique situation. Now, the defense is going to have the burden to prove that Ms. Powell was suffering from a severe mental disease, and she did not know the wrongfulness of her actions at the time of the murder. Now, you're going to hear testimony about her mental health after this incident. And it's important to remember, of course, you can consider that. I'm not going to tell you not to. But what I am going to ask you to do is to remember that the law is during the period of the offenses. What was her mental state at that? And that burden, it's a lot different than the state's. Although the state has to prove that burden beyond a reasonable doubt, that's not on the defense. Instead, the defense has to prove this by a preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not. That's the defense burden. And the state isn't going to sit here and pretend that anxiety was not a factor, that her stress of school wasn't a factor, that the stress of lying wasn't a factor.
There we
But
go.
the state believes that if you follow the evidence, it did not lead to this.
I feel like she cries
Her
more when
not
it's about her
knowing
mom in the grave.
wrongfulness of her actions because of the disease. And we're going to ask you, that's why it's so important
Yes, Dee Dee.
to talk about the evidence that you hear today, that you hear over the next few days, because that evidence you hear in the state's case in chief in presenting the offenses is the same evidence we're going to ask that you rely upon when you're determining this. And some of that evidence that you can look at is the lie after lie after lie. The dishonesty she tells her friends, the dishonesty she gives to her parents, Stephen and Brenda, the deceiving acts and pretending she's going to class and pretending to have canceled classes. She's able to go to school, to campus. She's able to see her friends. She's able to go to bachelor night. Miss Powell is building these lies. She's consciously coming up with them. And she continued to come with those lies even in the moment of the murder of Brenda. Because after Brenda is attacked, Miss Powell answers the phone by Mount Union. Hi, this is Brenda. Another lie.
I agree with him.
And as Brenda's dying and her dad calls her, yeah, Dad, Mom's on the phone with Mount Union. Another lie. And when the police arrive and when her dad arrives, there's been a break-in. Mom said, get out. Another lie. Consciously making these decisions during the time of the murder, before the murder, during murder, after the murder. Consciously choosing to lie. Yet on March 3rd of 2020, the truth caught up to these lies. Ms. Powell couldn't keep them up anymore, became overwhelming. She was stressed. Mount Union had dismissed her. Her parents were concerned. Her tuition was canceled. Her scholarship was canceled. Her enrollment was canceled. Ms. Powell couldn't keep the lie up anymore, and in that moment, she struck her mother.
Oh,
with
wow.
a cast iron frying pan over and over and over. She stabbed her mother with a steak knife over and over and over, hoping that that was finally enough. And she had the awareness to try and hide what she did. Now, I'm not going to pretend this is easy. I'm not going to ignore that there are some difficult factors in this case. There is a family that has been completely destroyed. We recognize that. There are emotions and feelings that cannot be separated in cases like this for the tragedy of what this family has gone through. But we talked about this yesterday, that you are a jury that has been selected to listen to the evidence. To listen to that evidence. I'm not asking you to throw out your human nature. That's who we are. But what I am asking you to do is to use your common sense, use your ability to weigh, to give credibility, and to assign evidence to where it should go. And we believe as a state that if you follow this evidence, that if you weigh this evidence, you'll be able to provide answers to what happened that day. And you'll be able to find that Miss Sydney Powell did take her mother's life. And she knew that in doing so, her actions were wrong.
Okay, so again, I asked the question, is it the environment? Is it nurture versus nature? Like what, or like FEM, has been saying, FEM, obviously, do you believe that there's, okay, there you go. I guess there's environmental factors with schizophrenia, but it definitely runs in family. Or are people like born evil, right? Like we've covered that in the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. But I do believe in this case, like, I do believe there was a mental health thing because like the way she was close with her mom, I do think, and how brutal it was, I don't feel like that's like a normal thing, right? Like, and maybe it was a lie or maybe not. We don't know. We didn't live in their life where the dad said like they never had any arguments or anything. But then we see the text, right? Like her mom says something about scamming her and she's lying for like 2 semesters or 1 semester, but she's failing 2 semesters in. And I questioned last night, like what could have been so bad that her mom was like, that her mom said that triggered her. But I guess there's a lot of things that could probably trigger her, right? Like, we don't know. She's schizophrenic, according to the professionals. There was like, I believe it was like 2 that believed she wasn't. And then there was 3 that believed that the mental health issues were like a real thing. And they supported that. So now we're going to listen to the teacher who called the mom and when Sydney pretended to be her mom. She's going to give her testimony. Thank you for being here, by the way. Stress is a huge factor. Pantera, you get attention. Hello, big girl. I've missed you. Where have you been? I haven't seen you for a while. Hello, Sarah. Hello, love. Good to see you. Okay, here we go. This is the dean assistant at the school.
Pretty tight in there, and the microphone will catch on your clothing. So if you'll just speak into it.
Good to see you, big girl. Mo, hello, beautiful Mo. Hello.
Thank you, Honor.
Good to see you.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Okay, great. I might move over to this other podium so I can see you, but I'll start here. And if you don't mind, could you please state
And then she pretended to be her mom too.
It's Michelle Gaffney. G as in Gary, AFF as in Frank, and EY.
And Ms. Gaffney, if you don't mind, where are you employed?
At the University of Mount Union.
Okay, University of Mount Union. Where's that located?
Alliance, Ohio.
Alliance, Ohio?
Right.
And Ms. Gaffney, how long have you been with Mount Union?
I think this is 29 years.
29 years? Okay. If you don't mind, what is your current position with Mount Union?
Currently, I serve as the Associate Dean of Students.
Okay. Have you been in that position for all 29 years?
No.
Okay. You've held other titles there?
Correct.
What are some of those titles?
I was a resident director, assistant director of housing, director of residential life, assistant dean of students, now currently associate dean of students.
Is it fair to say most of your career has been involved in student transition and student life at Mount Union?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Gaffney, what type of education or training did you go through in order to obtain your positions there at Mount Union?
So following undergraduate school, I went to Michigan State University and got my master's in higher ed administration and worked at Michigan State while doing so. And then worked at Temple University in Philadelphia as a complex director before coming to Mount Union.
Okay. If you don't mind, can you describe, I know this is kind of a general question, but what type of university Mount Union is?
Mount Union is a small private four-year institution, primarily undergraduate, although we have added graduate programs in the last 10 years or so. We're considered residential. The majority of our students live on campus.
It's, if you were to compare Mount Union to the University of Akron, much smaller class sizes and dorm life?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay. And Ms. Gaffney, were you in this position at Mount Union between the years of 2018 and 2020?
Yes,
Okay, and you're still there today?
yes.
Okay. I'd like to ask you kind of about the education there at Mount Union. Are there requirements that students must meet in order to remain a student at Mount University?
Yes, students are required to make academic progress,
Okay.
satisfactory academic progress.
Satisfactory academic. And is that monitored by the university staff or your office?
It is monitored by the university, not by my office specifically. That would be over in I serve in the student affairs office, and that would be monitored by the academic affairs office.
Okay. And is there open communication from your office and students regarding their progress in their education and their grades?
Yes.
Yay, Mary. I'm glad you made it.
Ms.
Mary.
Gaffney,
Yay. Recording.
if a student were to have a scholarship, can those type of benefits be put at risk if there's issues with their academics?
Yes. Although they have a period of time before it's reviewed.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that as
Yeah.
well. So let me ask you this. If a student is struggling with academics, what does Mount Union do to try to get a hold of this?
There are a series of a variety of different kinds of interventions. But as we're looking at it semester by semester,
I agree.
there's a committee that looks at it, that reviews all students at the end of every semester who are below a certain grade point average. And at that time, they may choose to put a student on academic warning, academic probation, academic suspension, or some of the means that they will use. Typically, probation would always occur prior to a suspension. We don't ever jump straight to a suspension.
Gotcha. So probation's your first step.
Yes.
Okay, and this committee, do they notify students
I don't
when
play.
that student may have
Not
to deal with
playing.
the probationary period?
Yes.
Okay, and how do they do so?
They do so in writing.
I'm really not
I
the one.
believe both hard copy and email. I believe.
And once that student is placed on probation, what is the goal of probation?
The probation is to help them turn things around and get on the right track, to make sure that they're aware of all the academic resources that we have on campus.
And that was my next question. Are they just set this
Not
letter
maybe
and
crazy
said, "Hey,
tonight."
figure it out, or
Oops.
what are they provided with?
They're asked to make an appointment with our director of academic support. And then that person will take them through, will look at their specific situation and see perhaps how or why they were struggling. Every student struggles for different reasons. So it may be academic preparation, it may be personal issues, it could be a variety of different things. And so they will try and tailor a plan for that student. But there are some common things that they typically are asked to do with regard to probation and attending maybe time management seminar, classes, or a variety of things that will hopefully help them right the path.
Yeah, so I'm going to break that down a little bit, and thank you. So
You speak into
Gary,
the
I'm coming
microphone.
for
I
you,
think some of the
Gary.
jurors are having difficulty hearing
Okay.
you.
Absolutely.
sorry, can you still hear me from here? I'm just going to shift over here.
Yes.
Ms. Gaffney, when a student's put on probation, you mentioned that one of the priorities is try to find out why that person might be struggling, whether it's personal or maybe they're struggling with attendance or actual education. And then do they put what, like maybe a case plan together?
That's typically they would work out sort of a plan.
And you mentioned that there might be some extra requirements during probation, such as study plans or a course that they might have to take.
Right.
Okay. And Ms. Gaffney, are there other, I'm trying to think of the right word, and I apologize if I'm saying
We might have
things
to have a
backwards.
vertical tonight.
Are there programs available to students who are struggling with scheduling, struggling with counseling, struggling with mental health issues? Are those available for students?
Absolutely. Again, through the academic support office, there are tutors available for specific classes if there's a specific area that they're needed. There are also counseling services available. Our counseling services, we have excellent counseling services in terms of availability. We do open door hours every single day from 2 hours a day every day for students that can come in without an appointment. And then, of course, you can make an appointment and be seen on a regular basis. But if you just needed to get in to see someone right away, there's 2 hours every day when a student can just walk in and be seen that day.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And these are trained counselors? Are they therapists?
Licensed counselors.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so these therapists, if needed, or certified counselors could make referrals for continued care.
Yes, absolutely.
And those are the type of information that your office wants to know if a student is struggling.
Yes.
And Ms. Gaffney, if the probation period doesn't turn around, what happens next?
So after a second semester, if there hasn't been any change or progress, or if they haven't sort of worked the plan that was developed, a student may be placed on academic suspension and suggested that they take a semester off. It doesn't close the door to them coming back to Mount Union. It's just the thinking is after 2 semesters of no academic progress or very little academic progress, perhaps there needs to be a step away and a reflection or a reevaluation of things. And then hopefully many times those students come back to us.
Okay. Now, is that
So they're talking, the reason why she's testifying is because for months, Sydney pretended to be enrolled in class and she ended up had to be forcefully removed from campus. Like she kept showing up in the dorm and like pretending she was a student and she wasn't. Again, thank you for being here tonight. Being here. And I saw a Gary. Gary, are you in the chat, Gary? Attention, Gary. Anyways, maybe after this, I'll make a vertical because now do I need to discuss the trolls now? It's not welcome at my channel. So we'll touch back on this. Says, I guess you're always a good student and you've never been on your whole identity is wrapped up in being a good student. Yeah, I get that. We talked about it on my first live too, like the academic pressure. And I've had friends whose parents are like totally like, if it's not like a straight A, like, you know what I mean? So I can understand it, but you know, that sucks. It sucks.
decision
her
to move
mom,
from probation
how
to
brutal it
dismissal,
was.
is that automatic, or does the committee meet again?
The committee, that same committee that reviews all students again. So that would be when they were reviewing all students at the end of the semester. So at the end of the spring semester, at the end of the fall semester, they meet every time, go through, decide whether to continue probation with different circumstances. So say the student has made some progress, they're still not they're still not making dean's list, but they've made some progress. They might continue because their grade point is still below what is what you need to graduate, but they would be continued on probation. If there has been little to no progress, they might decide then to issue an academic suspension.
And do they weigh other factors like a student's ability to work their case plan, attendance, communication with the office?
Right, they do look at, did they meet with the people that were suggested to them, and so on and so forth. Yes.
In a situation, unfortunately, where a student wasn't able to make that progress for whatever reasons they were dealing with,
Thank you, Mary.
how does the process of dismissal work? And if I'm saying dismissal incorrectly, please correct me. Yeah.
You fit right
We
in.
would, we issue a suspension,
get
academic
Suspension,
suspension,
okay.
is the first step after
Oh boy.
probation. A dismissal would be a permanent, and that's after a student has, if a student has been suspended, come back to us,
Be ready for it.
doesn't make progress again,
Okay.
and then a dismissal.
Well, then that's my fault.
That's okay.
I'm sorry I said dismissal.
That's
So
okay. But
if he's-
with a suspension, the question is how are,
yeah, what's the process of
so if the committee
suspension.
makes the decision to suspend,
Bowen,
a letter is drafted to them indicating that. It goes out to them through certified or registered mail, and also by email. But we do want to make sure that students have received it, and that's hard to verify by email. So there's a certified letter that goes to the home as well,
so that's mailed to where they're listed
the
at
permanent home address.
What's the purpose of that letter, or what does that letter serve as?
To let them know that their academics were reviewed and they are not unfortunately making satisfactory progress, and that at this time it is suggested that they take a break.
Now, once that student receives that letter as well as that email, are there any actions that they must take?
They have an opportunity to appeal the decision.
Okay.
So they can, and there's a date usually within a week or so of receiving the letter that they need to appeal by. The fall to winter break is a quick turnaround. So in the summer, I think they have in May, it's a little bit longer, but this would have been a winter. So it would have been a quick turnaround to appeal, but there was an appeal process available. Otherwise, they're told that if they were living on
Yes,
campus, that they
yeah.
need to move.
Because they're no longer enrolled.
Right, they're no longer enrolled. They need to coordinate moving out of housing.
Okay, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, you mentioned that this letter of suspension is sent via certified mail. Is there a tracking system that Mount Union uses to ensure that that student has proper notice? Is there a signature?
There is a signature required.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that suspension, that
she was still living on
correct me if I'm
campus.
wrong, the student can
Yeah,
come
she
back
was
after
enrolled,
taking a
according to
semester
me.
off.
Many times they do.
Okay.
I wouldn't be.
And you mentioned that
Right.
once a student is
Tell me
suspended,
about-
they wouldn't be allowed back into the dorms. Can you explain the process of who's allowed in the dorms and who's allowed to use Mount Union's facilities as a student?
So to live on campus, you have to be enrolled as a full-time student.
And that would be the same for if you wanted to use Mount Union's facilities.
The
workout
recreation
room.
facilities, sure, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it's
In
only for
general,
enrolled students.
yes,
Dorms are for full-time enrolled students.
right.
Okay. And part of that suspension, that student would lose access to all of those availabilities.
Yes.
Okay. Now, would your office address issues if somebody was having concerns with the suspension's a little bit overwhelming, or they're not sure what the next step is? Would they have access to try to understand that through you?
Absolutely. Either the student affairs or the academic affairs office, either one.
Okay, multiple.
The letters would have directed them to the academic
The
affairs
crime
office
is
more than
so
likely
brutal. I just can't get past
to
that.
understand the suspension
30
and what to do to get
stab
back in.
Over being
The
expelled.
housing piece would have been through an office in student affairs.
I know it's a different.
And Ms. Gaffney, I'm going to draw your attention to December of 2019. In your position, did you ever come across a Miss Sydney Powell?
Did I ever come across what? I'm sorry.
Miss Sydney Powell?
In December?
Or let me ask you this. If a student were to be suspended going into the spring, so January of the next year, would they be provided notice December of the year prior?
No.
When are they provided notice?
It would have by letter in December, they would have
In
been
December.
notified,
That's
but not
exactly
in
it.
person.
Not through you.
Yeah,
Just through,
not through
okay.
me.
So I'm going to,
Laura asked, how did they get her out of? So for like months, they were working with her. She was still on campus going to class, and then one of the fraternity or sorority girls realized that she wasn't on the roster, and she was like showing up, but to the dorm room she still had a card key, so she like kept on showing up until they like notified her that she was on academic probation, and then they notified her that she had like this many days to move out. And then she didn't move out, and she talked to the department, and they were like willing to work with her. And she said that it was like she didn't want her to stress her family out because they were dealing with her brother. And that wasn't true. So it kind of gave her more time to stay on campus. And then she was renting out a hotel. if you're schizophrenic and you're having a psychotic episode or whatnot, do you rent a hotel out for like a month? Living this lie, right? I'm not being judgmental. I'm just questioning all of it, right? We question all of these things. And thank you, Mary, for becoming a member. Well, you get verticals on the members only, which we talk about just random stuff in life. And you know, I like to come on there and, well, I get it, but talk. Oh yeah, that's all consuming to lie like that. Yeah, it's a lot to live these lies, right? And you just have to keep making up a lie after lie. That's why I said no lie is ever worth is better than the truth. Like, so yeah, they took her card key, and then they actually came to campus, and the security or campus police had to escort her off campus because she wouldn't leave. She was just like living there, like she was just a student, you know?
Mark and present to you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit. I think we're on three.
Oh no, not like forced through like the cops. I meant like the campus police, which is very different from the police. I should have clarified that. But still having to be like escorted out with your belongings and like, I don't know, like not forced to your move, but I feel like forced.
And Ms. Gaffney, if you can take a look at that and
It's
let me
horrible.
know if you recognize
It is horrible. Knife artist, so it's like all the same.
Yes.
Okay, what is that document?
This would be the letter,
I agree, Dee.
the letter indicating that Sydney was suspended.
Okay, so that's a suspension
Campus
letter.
police,
That's a
I
letter
don't
that's sent
think
to
they are
students.
real police.
Yes.
Okay.
I
And that
don't-
directs
I agree
them
with
on
them.
who to contact if they want to appeal or to address what's going on.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And Ms. Gaffney, who is that letter specifically to?
This is to Sydney.
And that's Sydney.
Sydney Powell.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take that from you. Just going to throw it on the document camera just briefly, okay? And Ms. Gaffney, is this a fair and accurate
Hello, Emily.
letters that are sent
Missed
to
you. I'm
students
sorry,
in this
love.
situation?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, my beautiful friend. Good to see you. I didn't
And
want
Ms.
to-
Gaffney, here we see the University of Mount Union identifiers.
So we'll try.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and then there's an explanation as to why the suspension is occurring, correct?
Yeah.
That first paragraph?
Yes.
She has a reaction.
And the bottom of that first paragraph, it specifically states what semester that student will be suspended from, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and for Ms. Powell, which semester was her suspension going to start in?
So it would have started in January of 2020.
Okay, and is that when Mount Union starts their spring semesters?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is the old trial. It was like a 12-day trial, I believe. And because after the crime, she got mental help. And so she didn't get like, it all happened last year in 2023, where she got convicted and sentenced and et cetera. And her lawyers put in a request in August of 2024 for an appeal. And it just got approved on August 26th. So they're overturning her conviction of 15 years. I guess not guilty by reason of insanity. So she probably will get put into like a facility if she gets a new trial. But it's wow, we're going to see a new trial again in 2025. That's why I wanted to make sure we had all the information before we watch it. Because we'll probably all be watching like court TV or something, right? Or even TV. We'll see. Will depend. Or she might take a plea deal where they take like the mental health or et cetera.
Ms. Gaffney, at some point, did you yourself meet Sydney Powell?
I did.
Okay. I just want to ask you briefly,
Yeah.
do you recognize Sydney Powell in the courtroom?
Yes.
Okay, can you point to what seat she's sitting in? Thank you, Attorney McLaughlin. Okay, Ms. Gaffney, how did you come aware of Ms. Powell?
I became aware of her when one of our staff members, who's the director of student involvement, had one of her student leaders that was a sorority president come to her and indicate that there was a student coming to sorority meetings who wasn't on our list of enrolled
hotel.
students for the semester. And the sororities have to turn in a roster each semester of who is there for collection of dues and all of the, organizational records that they have to keep, both for their university and their.
If you have a psychotic episode, it's not like maybe it could have been going on for months. I'm not denying that maybe she was having issues, but like, you literally were staying in a hotel. Like Didi said, like, that's like, you have to call, give your credit card number, you know what I mean? Like, are you having a psychotic episode when you're doing all of that? I question that. I do. And I'm very open and accepting of mental health issues. I've had my own in the past, so I'm very open to that. And I'm very comfortable with talking about it, which is sometimes when you see trolls in here, I come across like very aggressive. And that's not what I'm trying to do. But we're not gonna, we accept it, right? We don't accept the bullying of that stuff or any type of that shit, to be honest. So it's my channel. I make the rules, right? And I love you for being here. Thank you. But I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it. And so we're very open to the mental health aspect of all of the true crime that we talk about here. Every situation, every person is different, right? And everything we experience is different. And so I just want to remind everyone of that. Not that I'm worried about any of you here. We're always constantly in detention together, and I love you. But like, sometimes I feel like I do have to make that known, and that's sad, but it's 2025. It's a whole new world. If you're not caught up, I recently was targeted by a predator. So I feel like it kind of all plays into like talking about the whole mental health thing. Right. And so I'm very accepting of it. I'm very open of it. And when I question things, I'm not being judgmental. We're questioning it. We can question it and talk about it and conversate like adults.
National chapter. And so they were questioning the fact that we had left off a student from the roster who was attending sorority meetings and trying to clarify the mistake. And that our director of student involvement knew that it was not a mistake. She should not be on the roster, that she was not in fact enrolled for the semester.
Okay, so it was a student body who came forward looking for Miss Powell's name on their sorority roster.
Right.
But Miss Powell was not on that roster.
Right.
And why did your office know why she wouldn't be on there?
Yeah, right.
They knew that.
Right. Wanted to know if there was a mistake or if she, was enrolled, because they needed to account for her or collect, dues depending upon what the situation was. Yeah.
And Miss Gaffney, what did you do next?
So I reached out. We indicated to the president that the student was in fact not enrolled.
The sorority president.
The sorority president. And that was the extent of information, we shared with them. And just said, well, actually, it's not a mistake. Sydney's not actually enrolled this semester. And students can be not enrolled for all kinds of reasons. Students decide just not to come back, or, so that we're not sharing anything other than the fact that they're not enrolled. So, and then I reached out to Sydney. I don't know if I called her personally or if I asked Teresa, who's our administrative assistant, to call Sydney and ask her to come over to the office.
And why did you want to talk?
Meet.
Why did you want to speak with Miss Powell?
Well, when I spoke to the sorority president who was questioning it, they had said that Sydney had been attending sorority meetings, but was also, they said, they questioned me about Sydney not being enrolled because they'd seen her going to class, but they said they'd seen her going to classes.
So they
and that they were living on, that they were still living here. Okay. So that's why I called Sydney to find out to try and get to the bottom of it.
Okay. And what happened? Were you able to contact Miss Powell?
I was.
I haven't.
Sydney came over to the office.
Okay. Can you describe that interaction?
So I asked Sydney about.
I'm not a Netflix and chill kind of girl.
I think when she first came in, I said, Sydney, there seems to be some confusion.
Not Netflix.
It seems as though you haven't moved out of your residence hall yet, from what I can tell. But you're not enrolled this semester. You don't. You're not a student here this semester. And at first she replied to me that, oh, I am, but I'm still a student here. And I said, well,
did that catch your attention?
It did. And I had double checked before I called to see if, because I thought maybe she had appealed and I hadn't been notified that an appeal had gone through. So I checked and there was no schedule for Sydney. And I also checked at that time to make sure that she had received, with the Academic Affairs Office, to make sure she had received the letter and signed for it. In the event that maybe she just, if she didn't get the letter, she didn't know she was suspended and she had just come back and gone, started going to classes thinking she was, not realizing that she was suspended, on the off chance that that could happen. But I was able to verify from the Academic Affairs Office that they had received back from the post office that the letter had been signed for. So I believed that she was aware that she had been suspended.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Sydney or Ms. Powell herself said that she was attending classes?
Yes, when I said, but Sydney, you don't have a schedule. I just looked and there's no schedule for you. And I believe she said something along the lines of, well, there were some problems, but I worked that out with my faculty over the break through email.
Now, were you made aware by any faculty or any professors that Ms. Powell was attending any of her classes or any classes?
No.
Okay. Were you made aware that Ms. Powell was signing in on attendance in any class that she might not be enrolled for?
No.
Okay. And how did you and Ms. Powell's conversation end at that time?
So spoke a little bit further and said, and that's when I actually addressed the fact that the suspension, I said, Sydney, you received a suspension letter that you signed for.
I'm seeing
And so we spoke a little bit further and she said, well, yes, she had. And, but she had been hoping to get things changed or fixed. And so she had been trying to work things out.
So she did acknowledge that she knew about her suspension.
She did acknowledge then that she knew she was suspended.
Okay. What did you explain to Ms. Powell that had to happen next?
So I explained that she would have to, unfortunately, leave campus, that she could no longer remain living in our residence halls. That she would have to go home. I offered assistance. I asked if she had told her family, and she said no. And I said, I could help you with that if you would like, I'd be happy to, if that's something. I know that's sometimes very hard for students to make to tell their parents when you feel like you've maybe disappointed them or something along those lines. And I would be happy to call them with her if she'd like, to help tell them.
What was Ms. Powell's answer to that offer?
And she said no, she didn't need any assistance. She would, she knew what she needed to do, and she would do it, and she understood. She needed some time to move her things, and we can give you a few days to do that.
So you were comfortable giving her some time to move out of the dorm?
Yes.
Now, how was Ms. Powell entering the facilities there at Mount Union at the time?
So,
we're going to address this. Don't think we're not.
At that point in time, she had never turned in her key.
Okay.
So
is that like a physical key?
It is a physical key.
Okay. And what does that key give her access to?
So the key would have given her access to her room.
Her actual room.
Yeah.
How would she get into the dorm building itself?
The ID cards are programmed typically based on active status. So
like a swipe card?
Right. Yeah.
So when a student's not enrolled, that swipe card's not active.
Yeah. It is left on for students to be able to move out.
Okay.
So typically for a week or so at the start of the semester, it would have been on, and I don't know if it was not turned off or if it was, but typically a lot of our students, if they're traveling back and forth with their roommate or other students, they will just go in. It is not difficult to go in with another student. One person swipes and the other person goes in.
But through your office, you were going to give Ms. Powell a few days to get things organized.
We did.
Okay.
And then we had the card set to turn off on a certain. I can't remember which day after that, however many days after that, we said the card would stop working and we needed you to return your key by this date.
Perfect.
Which she did.
Now, Ms. Gaffney, you mentioned that you offer to communicate with a student's parents. Do parents not have access to student grades or notices of their suspension?
We don't communicate directly with parents. So that's
why is that?
Because she's 18. She's an adult.
There's a law called FERPA, the Family Educational Rights to Privacy Act.
Kind of like HIPAA?
it is very much like HIPAA, but it is the educational version that says we can't communicate without that student's permission if they're over the age of 18.
So parents wouldn't be able to log into a portal to see grades specifically.
Yeah, students can give parents permission to do that
Okay.
or sign a waiver that allows them to do that,
Wow.
but it has to be an active
Them.
decision on the part of the student.
And speaking of
I love
grades,
you both.
do students have access to their transcripts or their grades as cases or as?
At all times.
Okay, I'm going to present you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 4, just briefly.
So again, this was the dean's assistant that heard Sydney pretending to be her mom on the call on that day on March 30th when she was unalived. No, I don't Netflix and chill. Should I get Netflix? Let me know. Maybe we can talk about this on a vertical. I know. You're shocked. I don't have Netflix. I don't. I'm just a true crime junkie. For reals. Like, for reals.
I'm going to hand you this document, and Ms. Gaffney.
There's a lot of
explain
documentaries
what
and
you're
stuff.
looking at there.
This is one of our university transcripts.
Yeah,
for-
I know.
For Sydney Powell.
I know.
For Sydney Powell, okay.
I don't want to
And
adjust
so
this
Sydney
right
Powell was
now,
looking at
but
that transcript, could look at what grade she was dealing with and what's going on in her classes.
Right. This is these are reports for the end of each semester.
Okay, end of the semester.
Right. So the final grades.
Thank you.
I'll address it at the end. We'll have a conversation. Now we have to have a conversation.
And just briefly, I'm going to go ahead and put this on the document camera. These are specifically, I'm going to draw your attention to the top left. These are specifically the transcripts for Miss Sydney Powell.
Yes.
Okay. And those are the classes she was enrolled in specifically
Yes.
in those semesters.
Correct.
Okay. And the transcripts ends at the end of the fall of 2019. She wasn't enrolled for the spring.
Correct.
Now, Ms. Gaffney, back to after that conversation with Ms. Powell, she said she just needed a few days. What happened next?
The following, so after that date elapsed, we became aware that that Sydney was still spending quite a bit of time in the hall, more than enough that it seemed as though she was still living there, according to the hall staff who had checked to see if she had moved. And we found that she had not, in fact, moved out and
In
was
the
still
dorm.
of the residence hall and was still coming and going that following week.
Okay, so what did you guys do next?
We again asked Sydney to come over to the office. I think we had a staff member find her over in the residence hall and bring her over to the office. And
Okay. Was she able to meet with you?
she was, yeah.
Okay. And what happened at that second meeting?
So when she came over for that meeting, she met with myself and Dean Frazier, our Vice President of Student Affairs,
Is that John Frazier?
John Frazier,
Okay.
right? We met with her together to indicate that we needed to talk about the fact that she was still living on campus despite not being enrolled, and that we couldn't continue to have her living on campus.
Do you know when this might have been during the spring semester?
It was in February.
In February, okay. And what happened? What was Sydney's reaction to that second conversation?
She understood. She was just taking her longer to move out. She needed a little bit more time. We asked if she had shared with her parents the fact that she wasn't enrolled. She said that she had, and because we again offered, would it help if we would to have a conversation? Would you want to call your parents and see if they could come down and help you move out?
And Ms. Powell told you that she already told them.
And then, yes.
Okay.
And that they were having that they were on vacation. In fact, they weren't home. And that they were having a lot of problems with her little brother. And she didn't want to bother them because of all the issues they were having with her little brother.
Okay. And Ms. Gaffney, what happened after that conversation?
We again set another date and said, okay, you have to be gone then. I don't know if that was a Wednesday or a Thursday, but by Friday, her card had been turned off because
Okay.
it was past the date. So I believe we gave her access again to the hall so she could actually, get in and out without having to have someone let her. And she was told to move out by that date.
I'm sorry. Can you recall what happened after she was told to move out at that second meeting? What happened next?
She didn't move out.
She did not move out?
Right.
Okay. So what was the university's next step after that second meeting?
So that following week, when she hadn't moved out, we again, this time sent staff over to the residence hall because we were aware she was there at the time. I think our director of security and director of student conduct went over and asked her to come over. And Dean Fraser and I met with Sydney again and said, you cannot be here any longer. You're not enrolled. And again said, why don't we call your parents? And she refused. She did not want us to. She absolutely did not want us to do that. We asked again, are you sure you told your parents?
To make it.
We know this is difficult. We know how hard this can be. And she absolutely did not want us to call her parents.
And what happened after that third meeting?
She did then move.
Okay, was it that day or soon after?
I believe it was that day.
Okay. So
definitely by the next.
Okay, and Miss Powell then left campus.
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware of where Miss Powell went or where she was going to be staying?
Home. She said home.
Okay. She told you she'd be moving back home.
Yes.
Okay. Now, students, they're allowed to have friends over who aren't enrolled at Mount Union,
Yes.
correct? Okay. So if Sydney wanted to visit her old roommate or her friends or sorority sisters, she could do that freely. She just couldn't be living there on campus.
Yes.
Okay. And I want to draw your attention specifically to March 3rd of 2020. Can you explain to me what was going on in the early morning of that day?
So Dean Fraser and I had been in a meeting together elsewhere in the building where our offices are located. When we came back to the office, we had a phone message from Mrs. Powell.
Now, when you say
asking us to
phone
call.
message, is that like a voicemail or how does that work?
They had spoken to our administrative assistant
Okay.
Accountability
and
was an
asked for a call, asked for someone to call them about their daughter,
Everyone's in trouble.
Who's they?
We all
Brenda
get-
Powell.
Brenda Powell. Okay.
So,
And-
and our administrative assistant actually also said that the business office had called over with a question about
Yes.
that Mr. Powell had called about the bill
Tuition.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you and Mr. John Fraser do once you received that voice message?
So we were walking back together and we still had some work to do from the meeting we left. And Dean Fraser said, why don't we just go to my office and make this call first?
Okay.
So we went in his office and called the number on the phone message that we were given. And Dean Fraser was sitting at his desk and I was sitting next to it. He dialed, the phone was answered, and Mrs. Powell answered.
You say Mrs. Powell, is that Brenda who answered?
Brenda answered, yes.
And what did you tell Brenda at that time?
So Dean Fraser was speaking and simply said, Brenda, this is Dean Fraser. I'm sitting here with Michelle Gaffney, our associate dean of students. We're returning your call, and that's about as far as we got.
Did Brenda respond to that introduction at all?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
what did she say?
I think he asked, is this Brenda Powell?
Oh, okay.
And she said yes, and then he identified himself.
Okay. And Miss Gaffney, what happened next?
There was a very large or a very loud sort of thud sound, like a pounding or a thud.
I have to pause because we've talked about it here on Verticals. I know how squared.
Accompanied by a pretty loud scream.
I am a savage.
And the scream might have
Most like,
actually
Please
been
cut the
first,
line.
and then the thud.
Okay.
But
as
don't
I think about it. And then there was sort of an expulsion. The other sound that I heard at that same time or right after was sort of an expulsion of air, like the air was knocked out of somebody.
Okay.
We're gonna have
I'd
to
almost
have
heard
a-
that expression of the air being knocked, having the wind knocked out of you, but I didn't. That's actually what it sounded like. And then several more repeated
Yeah.
thuds. I don't know how to describe the sound
Oh, and that's okay. And you and Mr. Frazier could hear this from the other end of the phone.
from the other. It was on speakerphone, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear any communication during these thuds?
Just the screaming, and this, and so we were both talking into the phone, saying, what's happening? Are you okay? Do you need help? What's going on?
Yeah. Can you describe your mindset at this time?
I mean, I very definitely felt like someone was being attacked. And so
I may not be for you either.
we
It may
weren't
not
getting
float your
an
boat,
answer.
but
I think
can
at some
be
point I
so
said, if you can't respond, we're
Sorry.
going to call the police. If we don't hear,
Thank you.
if no one can tell us
You're
what's going
so
on.
You love me.
The dean's has an administrative assistant right outside his door. So I said, well, I'm going to get Sydney's address. And he kept talking. And so
Mr. Frazier?
Mr. Frazier, yeah, Dean Frazier. So I opened the door and told our admin, I said, I need Sydney Powell's address right away.
Cover true crime all day.
And in the meantime, I had my phone and I was looking up the
Hold on.
number for the Akron Police Department.
No, yeah. Why didn't, let me ask you this. I'm sorry, I interrupt you again.
It's okay.
Why didn't you want to call 911?
Because I knew it would go to Stark County Dispatch. I work with our security and the Alliance Police quite a bit.
Okay.
And we actually, when we need the police, we call the Alliance Police Dispatch and not 911 because it goes to Stark County and not Alliance.
Okay.
And they often don't. It takes longer.
So you wanted to get directly
I wanted to get
in contact
directly. I knew she was from Akron. I wanted to get directly to the Akron police. So
And Ms. Gaffney, can you describe how that phone call continued or what happened next?
So while Tara is our assistant, while Tara was looking up that address, the phone cut off
Are you holding me back? Are you
at some
holding me
point
back?
after. I would say that somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 of those thuddings, those sort of thud sounds. And the screaming had continued.
And when you say the phone cut off, did the call drop or
The
was
call
it hung?
dropped. Yeah,
Okay.
we lost the call.
Okay.
And so we decided to keep, while we were waiting for the address, to keep calling. We called the number back,
Brenda's number?
Brenda's number that she'd left. And we called twice and there was no answer. It rang and rang and rang and no answer. When it went to voicemail, we hung up and we called again. And then on the third time, and I had just gotten the address as the phone was
The
answered
timing, I
Okay.
know.
on
I
the third
noticed. It's
on the third
brutal.
try to the number. And Dean Frazier said something along the lines of, Brenda, is that you? Are you there? And the voice on the other end said, yes, this is Brenda. Yes, this is Brenda.
Now, Ms. Gaffney, did you recognize that voice on the line?
Yeah,
Okay. Was that Brenda
it
Powell?
was not Brenda.
Who did you recognize that voice to be?
I was sure it was Sydney. Both Dean Frazier and I looked at each other and sort of shook our heads at each other and said, that's not Brenda. And he then said, I don't, Sydney, I think this is you. This is not Brenda.
And what happened next?
The phone went dead.
Okay. And Ms. Gaffney, what did you do next?
We called the Akron police. By that point, I had the phone number up and the address. And so we called the Akron police and indicated we felt there was some sort of situation at this house and that they needed to send someone right away.
Did you have any other involvement with the Akron police or the Powell family after that?
The police called back maybe a couple hours later and told us that, just to say that they had gone to the house and that they were, I believe what we were told was that they were transporting 2 women to the,
You're welcome.
I don't know which hospital they said, but one of the Akron hospitals. There were 2 women being transported to the Akron hospital and, thanked us for having called.
That's like,
But
Brilliant.
we asked who was going to the hospital and they couldn't tell us.
Okay. So you were never told by the Akron Police Department what had occurred or what was going on?
Not at that point. We actually, we learned about it on the news.
Okay. And then
the rest
later
of the details.
you
Yeah.
had an opportunity to meet or have a conversation with a detective with the Akron Police Department.
A couple days later.
Okay. And you shared the same information with him?
Yes.
Okay.
Fem, you know I love you. Fem is an amazing person. We'll have to do a vertical after this if everyone's gonna be out. It's early here, but we can talk about these things. But yeah, Fem is
This guy, I have a few more questions
Fem's
for
a
you.
good person.
Okay.
And I'm going to take us way back to when we first started our conversation. In general, there's a
Goes along with what I
difficult,
just
correct me if I'm wrong, is it difficult for a student to transition from high school to on-campus university?
It can be. Yes,
Yeah, don't
In Mount
believe
Union, they recognize that struggle,
absolutely.
anyone.
and Mount Union provides opportunities to try to work on that transition.
Yes.
And can you describe, in your experience, you've been with Mount Union and the university education for a long time, why might students struggle?
I think there's a variety of reasons.
I mean, I
Academic
have to feel
preparation sometimes is certainly part of it. Sometimes trying to determine at Mount Union, students struggle a lot. We have a lot of student athletes. Sometimes athletics doesn't work out for them, and that's been a big part of their identity. And so that's a struggle
It is a
when they
big part of their
find that they are not excelling in that area, and then they have to figure out what they're going to do if athletics isn't their path. So there's all kinds of, but there also just general personal obstacles and challenges.
Now, what's, in your experience, the average age of a freshman college or a first-year college student? How old are they?
Typically around 18.
Okay. And is it fair to say that in a lot of these situations, this is the child or the individual's first time away from home?
Yes.
Okay. And your experience, does that come with its own freedoms that students may struggle with?
They struggle with some students struggle with freedom, some struggle with homesickness, both.
Okay.
It's
And
amazing how many students are close to home and homesick when they only live 20 minutes away.
now, when you say freedom, what type of freedoms do college first-year students have?
They have the freedom to sleep in the morning, which is a real struggle for students in some cases, because so they don't always have someone there who is motivating them to get up and go to class and do some of those things. There's certainly the freedom of going to parties and staying out late, and those kinds of things as well. So the social freedoms, but also some of the lack of structure that they might have with high school and academics and people who are maybe more closely monitoring what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I know this is kind of a goofy question, but university isn't like a high school where you're in the same building and you have a scheduled 8 a.m. to
Right.
9 a.m., 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Classes
Right.
are spread out.
Classes are spread out. You're actually only in class usually 15 to 20 hours a week of class time. And the rest is time that is expected for you to be working on papers and research and things like that on your own time. And so definitely there's not the structure. So you have to be motivated. You have to have good time management skills, all of those kinds of things.
She was on a presidential scholarship. So when we talk about, the pressure that she was feeling and all of it playing into the crime, and if you believe she was having mental health issues, that's a lot of pressure. It is. Like a presidential scholarship, straight, pretty much being top-notch student, it's hard to meet that. I've been, like I said, I've been a college student before, and it is hard. It's very hard. I can empathize.
Those are the
with that.
common struggles.
And we talked about suspensions. If a student is suspended, they can
Thank you,
re-enroll and come back.
I
to
love
Mount
you too,
Union,
Meow.
correct?
Yes, it's usually
That's
just for one
meow.
semester.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
they lose all the credits they built in the previous years?
Thank you
No.
for apologizing.
They start back right where they left.
Right
off.
where they left off. Yes.
Okay. So any credits they've earned by passing
Let
grades
people
or
apologize.
they
Yes.
can still use towards graduation.
Yes, and in fact, the classes that they fail, they have the opportunity to replace the grades to take the same courses for a replace of change of grade. So if you failed a class and then you take it again the next semester and you get a a B or, an A in it even, that F is replaced with, so it can build your GPA back up very honestly,
quickly.
very quickly.
Now, I want to draw our attention back to Ms. Powell. Did you receive any actual reports that Ms. Powell was attending classes?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Were there any professors that reported that Ms. Powell was wandering into their classroom or acting as if she was a student in their classroom?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. But when Ms. Powell met with you that first time, she said she was meeting or talking to her faculty.
Yes, she said she had worked things out over the break. I don't know that she said she was talking to them since classes have begun, but that she had worked things out to get into classes.
Okay. Now, did any of Ms. Powell's sorority sisters or roommates indicate that no, Ms. Powell was in class with us?
No, I never heard. I mean, I know she was going to sorority meetings, but I don't know that she was going to class.
Okay. With any specific
with any of them.
friends?
No,
okay.
I'm not aware of it.
And we talked quite a bit about these three separate meetings you had with Ms. Powell. And I want to talk about specifically, when did she leave campus? What month was this?
It would have been in February.
Okay. Would it be the beginning of February, end of February?
Closer to the end.
Okay. Close to the week of March 3rd?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I would guess a week or so maybe prior to that, but
Okay.
yes.
So within 7 days from March 3rd?
Yes.
Just 1 second, Ms. Gaffney.
It was basically over.
Your Honor, this time we have no further questions for Ms. Gaffney.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination?
That was the teacher who heard Sydney acting like she was Brenda. So tomorrow we'll be covering the next two testimonies that I found were more important. It's rough, it involves mental health and then it involves family. I understand we can have mixed opinions, or you can have your opinion about whether you think it was a mental health psychotic episode or whether you think she was just evil. We're all entitled to our own opinions, and so I respect that. We may not be on the same page. I respect it. I can understand that. But I appreciate you guys for being here. I'm going to do a vertical in a second, so I hope I see you guys there. I know it's late for some of you. Was she ever officially diagnosed? Yes, Mo, she was. She was diagnosed schizophrenic after the crime. So after she got from the crime scene, she went to the hospital, and then she went on a 72-hour hold, and then they actually ended up admitting her, and then she ended up being on bond for a while, living with her grandmother while she was getting supervising mental health treatment. And then they end up convicting her or whatever, charging her. And so she ends up going to jail, and now she's getting her conviction overturned, and it got approved on December 26, 2024, because the prosecution, the state didn't allow for some of the medical professionals on the legal defense team to rebuttal an argument regarding mental health issues. And the appellate court approved it. And so she's either going to get a new trial or she's probably going to get a plea deal. And so we're going to probably be covering it. I don't have enough to make up my mind yet. Right. And that's why I said, don't make a judgment until you watch all of it, right? We did the deep dive, the body cam footage, the crime scene photos, the facts, the background, and now we're watching the trial. It's not all televised, so I'm just covering the most important people testifying and where we can get the most facts about the case. So why didn't she live with her dad? She didn't. They lived together. It was her and her mom and her dad and her brother Andrew. And she was away at school. And all of this started happening allegedly in 2019, November, December 2019. And she was living on campus because she was on a presidential scholarship, and she was captain of the soccer team and et cetera. And so she started, of course, failing and lying, and people saw a change in her, and she went home for break one time and then came back to campus, and she was already suspended. And then she made it seem like she was still a student and enrolled. And she ends up unaliving her mom when she comes home from spring break when they all find out that she had been lying about being enrolled. So I feel like a lot of people's opinions are that, you know, she just didn't want her lie to be uncovered, and, you know, she'd been living it for so long. But again, that could be a mental health issue, you know. Augie, you just woke up. You missed it, Augie. I'm doing a vertical, so I appreciate you guys for being here. I love covering Sydney Powell case, so we're going to continue to cover it tomorrow and this weekend. We're going to continue Sydney Powell case, Jared case. We have jail calls, and then I have a bunch of new cases where I have a lot of body cam footage. So I'm trying to put it all together. We have some good stuff coming. Overachiever, meltdown, passion, finally cracked her. I believe that too. I said that earlier. Like, I do definitely believe that it is a lot, you know. It's a lot of pressure. College is hard, especially if you're, depending on what you're there for. It's hard. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. Hello, ATS. I'm after the crime. Oh, that's a good question. Why didn't she live with her dad after the crime rather than her grandma? Right. Why did her dad leave the phone at work when he went home and he didn't want her to know? And then why did the police recover text messages where the mom kind of had an idea of what was going on? You know, there was a lot of secrets. And I feel like we're kind of like a representation of that, right? We all go through stuff. And we all live our own life with like our parents, our family, whatever it is. And so we don't know what was going on in the home. We weren't physically there listening and watching. We weren't a fly on the wall, as much as we always use that term. We weren't there. And so, and I speak generally in that sense of like, even people on YouTube, you're not there, right? So like, you don't judge people, but also realize that between right from wrong, and also realize that everyone's different. You know, it's like being accepting. And I feel like for us, those of us who are like true crime junkies, it's important to like stand on that, right? And be a representation of like the cases that we see. And so with Sydney Powell, I do think it was a mental health issue. And I would like to have another live and have a conversation about like mental health. That would be really good. I think that would be really good. Hello, Mary Beth. Enough of me ranting. I'll see you soon on a vertical, and I'll see you tomorrow night. If you're not a member and you can't make it to the vertical, that's okay. I support you being here on my channel. The true crime, that's what I'm here for. I love it. Sorry, sometimes we get a little spicy in here, but I'm not going to come on here and pretend to be something I'm not. So pretty much that's where it's at. I'm like, it's like you either get the real me or it's like not going to work out. Unlike Sydney Powell, I cannot fake it. I cannot come up on here and pretend to be something I'm not. So if you haven't watched the Reset Members Live, please, if you can, become a member. I hope to see you there. I appreciate you, all of you, for being here tonight, participating in the chat. Fem, Fluffer, I'm questioning that. Killa, I saw Mo, ATS, all my mods. I love all my mods. They're my friends. Again, yes. Join the membership. I will see you guys soon. And if I don't see you for the vertical, then I'll see you tomorrow night for another True Crime Live. And I will be streaming all weekend. So let's welcome Friday with a positive attitude. Stay kind. Stay blessed. Do the right thing. I know. You're like, what do you mean? It's hard sometimes when you're on social media. I get it. But nonetheless, I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting my channel. And I will see you soon. Bye.